Hello and welcome to Red Red. Today I'm going to do a quick video talking about Ryūnosuke Akutagawa's Kappa. And the reason I think this will be a quick video is because this is, I picked this up as a follow-up to having read and made a video on Rashomon and 17 other stories. And so I will be able to skip over a lot of the praise for Akutagawa, a lot of finding him, because, yeah, really I just read Rashomon stories and I'd heard about Kappa and I was like, okay, I'll just go out see if I can find it. So if you want my general impression on Akutagawa's writing, which is overall very positive and I like him quite a lot, I would say he's close with Kobo Abe as being one of the Japanese writers with which I resonate most strongly. Yeah, so I was keen to pick up. I just went out and picked up Kappa, and I'm going to share some thoughts on it. I can see why this maybe wasn't included in the original collection. It is quite a long, it's basically a novella. It's about 90 pages long, although a little bit of a sour point for me. I don't know, this is just, maybe it's unfair, but this book, this Peter Owens, is published by Peter Owens Modern Classics. This book has a 40-page introduction, and so overall, and Kappa is only 90-something pages long, and so kind of nearly half of the book is an introduction, and yeah, I don't know, it just puts a slight sour taste in my mouth, and maybe it would have been fine if it was just here's a 40-page essay on Kappa, but it is really basically just a big extended biography. A lot of the details I already knew because I had really just come off reading the other stories, and I was looking up biographical details, so there were only a couple of pages talking about Kappa, of which were really, really good, but yeah, I don't know, it just puts a slight sour taste in my mouth when, because obviously you skip the introduction before you start reading, and it's just okay, right, now I can start the book. But anyway, yeah, when you actually do start the book, we've got an author's preface as well, which is the story of patient number 23 in one of our mental homes. Basically, this patient is just kind of perusing, wandering about. He comes across a Kappa, which is a Japanese folklore creature that's this is a fun Squirtle-esque caricature, but they look sort of like walking on two legs toads that have this sort of intricate, very disgusting, slimy quality to them. But anyway, this guy gets taken to Kappa Land, where he learns Kappanese, which is just the funniest thing ever. And it's sort of a vehicle for Akutagawa to be like a stranger in strange lands, critiquing ideas that come up in Japanese society, but also, as I got sort of later on in the book, I felt like Akutagawa was really just critiquing a lot of ideas of himself. And I do want to read something from the author's preface where he talks about that, where so this is first our introducer, G.W. Healy, saying, after Kappa was written, the whole story was written in less than 2 weeks. Most of the critics clearly did not know what to make of it. One thought it was a children's story, another thought it a sweeping criticism of society, a third thought it socialistic. Only one, Yoshida Taiji, appears to have understood that it was a distillation of the author's feeling of revulsion from the whole of human life, and to him, Ryūnosuke wrote in gratitude, "Of all the criticisms of Kappa, yours was the only one at all that impressed me. Kappa was born out of my disgust with many things, especially with myself," which, again, I talked a lot about it in the Rashomon video, but if you know the story of Akutagawa, you will just hear how much that hits. And so, yeah, we go on, and there are some really stark standout differences in Japanese society. One of the things being that children need to consent to being born. And so what happens is, firstly, the way that Kappas breed or they reproduce or they get married is that women set their sight on a male Kappa and then will just chase them, literally run after them, and the male Kappa will just need to run and hide, and sometimes the act of running and hiding can be so physically debilitating that they just fall over and die. But after they've been impregnated, the female Kappa, it'll get to the point where they're about to give birth, they'll go to the doctor, and then the father will shout into the vagina and just be like, "Do you wish to be born?" And some children don't wish to be born, and this very much, it's, you know, if you know about Akutagawa and his fear of kind of inheriting his mental illness from his mother, it's very clear that it's very strongly implied that he dealt with schizophrenia, and you can really clearly see that if you read something like Spinning Gears. It's very sort of wild, but it is talking about, it's a almost pre-antinatalism, but talking about just this idea of not consenting to be born. And like Akutagawa is able to use this sort of wild fantasy world of Kappa Land as a vehicle to talk about it. Early on, he's, this is about page 67, which I guess is about page 20 of the book, and he talks about meeting Tok, the anarchist, and Tok says, Tok's a poet, and he's talking about like, oh, you are anarchist, and Tok says, no, I'm actually a Superman. And so of course you're getting some Nietzsche influences, and you'll even go on later into the book, they go to this church where they worship all of these certain idols, and Nietzsche is one of them. And I want to just read an example really quick. So he's talking about the differences between Kappa society, or talking about super Kappahood. So, and from here it's quote, let me give you an odd example. I remember once watching one of the sculptors, I think it was, standing in the middle of a group of potted giant ferns. He had his arms round a young Kappa, and he was engaged intently in the finest public act of consenting homosexual adults you could ever hope to see. Note that this book was written in 1927, by the way. And on another occasion, a woman Kappa novelist was standing on a table showing us how to drink bottles of absinthe. She got as far as 60, but I expect I don't need to tell you that that after she downed the 60th bottle, she slumped from the table to the floor. In a second or two, she was dead. So we're talking about some Enlightenment ideas, of course, sort of very much being processed through Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra and all of that. Yeah, it's an interesting book. It's an interesting short story, and we go on, it kind of develops it more. We have this scene where a Kappa commits suicide, and then we talk to him from beyond the grave, and we get some of Akutagawa's ideas of, the ghost is only sticking around, the ghost of this poet is only chilling around because he wants to see the influence that has been left on him, and a really sort of intense experience that I can only recommend you read only after reading other Akutagawa works, or at least do a kind of dive into his biography and sort of know what his deal is, what he's looking about, which, again, there are some Akutagawa stories, like the ones later in his life, Life of a Stupid Man, Spinning Gears, the one about a funeral that I unfortunately can't remember the name of, but that are all kind of pretty sort of autobiographical anyway, so I still just recommend going and reading those. But I think you will find that this will be an interesting complement. It's not magnum opus, and I was saying that, like, I don't really think a lot of short story writers have magnum opus, but you know, Hellscreen and In a Bamboo Grove are also are really, really amazing. This is not like the story to be like, oh yeah, all of his short fiction stuff is good, but Kappa is the shit, man. Really, it's just a kind of other compliment, and I do really recommend it. I recommend it at least as much as I recommend his other stories. But yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about with Kappa. There weren't really many highlights or like extracts in prose. Don't know if it was a translation thing. Mostly it was just kind of fun to see these odd comparisons and these juxtapositions of things that, again, we're sort of looking at this at the luxury of being nearly 100 years after this book is being published. Check it out. Let me know what you thought of Kappa and how you think it stands in comparison to Akutagawa's other shorter pieces. But yeah, thanks for watching. That's all I wanted to say on Akutagawa's Kappa, and I'll see you in the next video.